Today's episode of the Gestalt Education Show is brought to you by three of our favorite sponsors: Human Locomotion, Core 360 Belt, and Dynamic Disc Designs. All the information can be found below. By now, you have definitely heard us talk about them, so check out the show notes, click the links, use the codes, and make sure you support our favorite people. As always, we got a great episode lined up for you today, and thanks for tuning in. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Gestalt Education Show. Today we are in Orlando, Florida. Brett, funny story, I don't even think they know this. The last time I was in Orlando, Florida, my appendix exploded literally a month ago. And so no PTSD coming in here. And so we were on a little bit of a podcast hiatus because of that, but we're back in full force and we're happy to be here. Today I've got two really, really special guests. And so you probably recognize the guy all the way on the end, Capo, back for round two, co-founder of Rocktape, and I can't wait to sit down with you and talk. And then a new guest, Dr. Ryan Comeau. And so we've had Capo on, we kind of know his backstory, but Ryan, could we, you're the founder of Kinetisense, and so I think a lot of people are going to know that name. You're trying to be or probably are the leading expert when it comes to motion capture software, especially when it comes to chiropractors. And so where did this idea come up of Kinetisense? And then, once we kind of introduce you and stuff, I want to kind of play off of both of you guys on technology, which is the reason that we're here this weekend. We're here to kind of have a big panel discussion with Mike Leahy and ART about where does technology fit into healthcare? And so I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that, but tell us your backstory. How'd you come up with Kinetisense and kind of that whole route?
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on the podcast. It's great to see you.
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
And so it's a really, really interesting story that I had. I grew up playing sports. I was a hockey player. And throughout my hockey playing career was constantly, unfortunately, getting injured. And I was always getting injured on the same side of my body. So it'd be like a right hip injury, and then I'd be going through the whole process of rehab, and then then to my ankle, and then to my knee, and it actually really affected my ability to play when I was playing college hockey. But it was kind of neat because it allowed me to kind of see different practitioner types, whether it was sports medicine, physical therapists, all the way to chiropractic, and that's what introduced me to chiropractic. And it was actually the chiropractor that started to look at the chain. How does the body move three-dimensionally? I call it triplanar. How do we sequence when we move, and how do we compensate? And was maybe, my knee taking on rotation compensations that were taken away from my hip at any given time because of my injury cycle. So I was like, this is interesting, this biomechanics thing. So that's kind of what got me into chiropractic. And then I had a little bit of work working with the Vicon System University labs and seeing what three-dimensional movement was like and looked like. And then fast forward to chiropractic school, I was like, man, we're really missing technologies that allow us to look at multi-segmental biomechanical movements that are complex, right? We're missing those tools, right? We have to eyeball. And I just thought that this is a big gap in healthcare, because the MSK healthcare system, we're 33% of the entire healthcare system, yet we lack these tools. So I wanted to try to find a way that we could get objective analysis and devices that were readily available, like the iPad, and basically create a portable biomechanics lab to start to objectify what we're doing.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. So that's a long story long. I guess.
In the present day right now for Kinetisense, what if you were, let's just say we pose this question to a lot of people too, if you walked into a modern day chiropractic office and you saw them using Kinetisense, what would you be really proud of them for doing? What would it actually look like when you walked into a chiropractic practice in Troy, Missouri or something like that?
Yeah, no, totally. What would it look like? I mean, it's really at the end of the day, what drives the clinical ecosystem. The reason why we do what we do as practitioners is to drive outcomes for the patient. Mm-hmm. So we got to think about, what is the experience for the patient? And that starts at the assessment. Yeah. So if we have, let's say, someone in front of a big screen TV in the clinic, and they can see all their joints light up, and they're seeing that they're being analyzed, objectively.
The patients have to love it, I would think.
Oh, they absolutely, it makes a huge impact actually to the overall compliance of their care pathway. Right. The opportunity for education and dialogue with their practitioner. And the biggest thing is, that differentiation, right? So that patient to practitioner perception is like through the roof.
Right.
This guy is giving me, but this guy's giving me an experience of assessment that's going to drive me through a care pathway that's objective the entire way.
Yeah, and then so are they charging separately for it, or it's just kind of built into the cake, or it just depends on the situation?
Depends on the clinic.
How you want to do it, yeah.
So we have setups where we have big screen TV in the waiting room, and they'll have free posture screens for anyone that comes into the clinic, where the front desk staff can even run the system, so the practitioner doesn't even have to run it. All the way to bringing in sports teams. It's incredible with sports teams because you can, the football team, you can say, hey, come to our clinic. We'll do concussion baseline testing on you with balance, or we'll run you through our CAMS functional movement screen, and it's $100 a screen. So it can add a cash component to the practice, but you can also use billing codes for that too. So baseline screening then usually drives them in as patients at some point when they need to see you for care.
Gotcha.
So it adds a whole new element, and it's a big differentiator. So it can grow practice quite quickly and can help to increase, I guess, opportunities of offerings for your current patient base.
So is there any other data points besides motion capture? Is there center of gravity? Is there other? Yeah, what all is included?
Well, we have 20 different modules now. We've added a center of mass trace. We're about to launch our new clinical gate module, where 15 feet away in a hallway, we can have someone walk towards the sensor, and we track biomechanically, three-dimensionally all their joints and then their center of mass too, score it.
Very cool.
And then FPM map actually show the joints need mobility and stability, and by plane for every single one of our modules too.
Very good.
So again, that biomechanical assessment where you can make your own workflows, you can add ROMs in there and get a lot of data on their progress.
Well, and I think that the two differentiators, at least for me, would be obviously like ease of use. So being able to use an iPad Pro to do all this without having a separate room just for motion capture, and then obviously cost. Upfront cost. And so can you kind of walk us through your thoughts on where that's going? Like are you kind of set with where it is? Is there more things coming cost wise? What does it cost a practitioner, and kind of how quickly can they recoup their costs with a cash based model or something like that?
No, that's a great question. So the iPad Pro is about $1,200 for an iPad Pro. That's a one-time cost, obviously. And then about $250 per month. Gets you the system. So if you think about, if you're able to do a CAMS assessment, which is usually $100, $150 per assessment, you only have to do 2 of those a month. Mm-hmm. And so the return on investment is usually within 1 month, and then the rest of the year is it monetizes incredibly well. We find that in some clinics it even increases new patient acquisition by 25%. Yeah. So if you think about a new patient usually generates about $1,000 per year on average, that's significant.
Right.
So the ease of use is very important, because anytime we have a technology that we want to implement in, it has to be clinically efficient. That's crucial. And Kinetisense is very, very easy to use. So and portable, right? So you can take it from room to room. We can assess from even 3.5, 4 feet away. So we can assess in a treatment room now. And it can be done by non-practitioner staff members too. So it allows you to be even more efficient as a clinician if you have like a kinesiologist on site, or an assistant that can even run the assessment portion. So the new parts that are coming out, we have our 1,000 corrective exercise engine that we can automatically send to the patient through the end user app. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to do a really cool project where we're actually looking at center of mass mapping in conjunction with the algorithms of range of motion of the various joints three-dimensionally, with looking at muscle activity. So electromyogram, we think that we can actually replace EMG and actually incorporate it right into the system just through 3D mocap.
Insane. Capo, I know that you love technology. I mean, you basically built Rocktape on technology. You get kind of pitted into the corner as the tape guy, but I know technology is a big part of your brain and kind of your brand. So, I mean, where do you kind of see this type of technology in the motion capture in your world?
I've been stalking Ryan and the Kinetisense team for well over a year and a half, because I believe that this is the evolution of our profession, the chiropractic profession, the evolution of sports medicine in general. Like if we're not capturing data, then we're not really serving the patient, nor are we being effective and efficient. So that platform was looking at motion cap in itself. I find that they're the leaders. So I've, like I said, I've been stalking them because I felt that there was an opportunity to be able to collaborate. And this is what I do think is another transformative movement within our space, is that folks are starting to connect to be able to say, how do we solve more? How do we connect more to improve, create a more of a solution-based, alternative for our patients and clients?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And then how about, have you been messing around with tape? Like, how does tape then incorporate in? I know that Rocktape has this whole education track on teaching people how to assess and then apply applying the tape is the small part of it, which we talked about in our last podcast. The assessment is the biggest piece. Knowing when and where to tape is the big piece. And so how does motion capture fit into that assessment piece for you?
It's critical because then it takes the subjective component away from what we're doing, right? So like in most of our curriculum, we're looking at movement because we want to influence it somehow. And the tools that we have primarily are going to be tape in our category. So one of the reasons why I felt this system was so effective for me is that it provided an objective screen of the body and said, these are areas that are lacking in mobility. Perfect, that we can implement whatever corrective that we have available to us, from hands-on therapy to cupping to flossing and all the other tools that are available. But then identifying areas that are lacking in stability, the first entryway into that window is through tape on the body. So it kind of gives us a location to focus attention on. And that's what I've been doing with their technologies, using it to screen someone, identify areas that are lacking stability, and then slapping some tape on them to see if we could start that process of correction.
Well, and then you re-video them?
Immediately. And that's the other benefit, again, is like subjectively, I say, how do you feel? And they're like, man, I feel so much better. But, can we quantify that? And now we can, right? And we can take this data trend wise and see, are we influencing the individual over time? Are we seeing robust changes versus just acute changes that last an hour?
Right.
So that's the part that I think is the evolution of our profession, is that we have objective data on certain biomarkers that we can actually address.
Right. Well, and I think those objective changes, sometimes it's tough. Brett and I, we're kind of in the camp of, N equals 1, and now you are as well. Like patient to patient is so difficult. But then, we had a conversation before about trending this, taking this technology and then using trends to actually identify people that would benefit maybe more from manual therapy and things like that. And I think that that's kind of another goal of yours, or what you're kind of trending towards, is taking these populations of people and then comparing your N equals 1 that you have in front of you to those populations. Yeah. So can you kind of talk on that?
Yeah, 100%. Trend is the perfect word. When we start to objectify, and we have an objective tool that gives us data that's reproducible every single time, we can look at trend data of that specific patient, if they're trending up, trending down, functional fatigue over the course of a sports season, for instance, of an athlete. We can start to track that. We have professional teams that are using our system just for that. But then you touched on how we can start to get population-based or micropopulation-based data. So looking at what techniques, whether it's a taping technique or whether it's, active release technique, what protocol combinations make the biggest change for a certain body type, for a certain age, for a certain gender, for a certain diagnosis. This is where we start to go from what has really been theoretical in clinical rehab, I think, to science. And we can start to report that back into the system as normative data. And that's called clinical triaging. So now if I screen someone, I know what their age, their gender, their diagnosis is. It'll say, hey, based on this population type, our data suggests that this protocol plus some home care exercises that look like this is the best angle to attack. Never, ever replacing the practitioner. It's expert augmentation. That's the key, not expert replacement. Yeah. And so it is about data and trends and being able to use that to augment our practice.
What's changed in the motion capture world in the last 10 to 20 years? Like what's
the biggest thing is just the availability of commercially available products that allow us to get 3-dimensional data.
Right.
That's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
two-dimensional. We're missing that transverse plane. I think that we're lacking there as clinicians. We need three-dimensional at any given point. So being able to do this on an iPad and soon to be the iPhone is just so powerful. Because before we literally had to have university biomechanic labs.
Right.
There were $1 million, massive space. We can't have these in our clinics. We just can't afford them.
Right.
So that's what's changed, is the quality of three-dimensional motion capture built into these technologies that we have at our fingertips. That's what's changed.
I think for me too, and I know I kind of want your opinion of this. Brett and I, we struggle all the time, or as educators, we all do, of trying to get young clinicians to be able to kind of shortcut that assessment piece, which I know is the hardest thing. Like, assessing is such a skill. Like, we always joke, like, we can teach someone to adjust in a weekend, and they don't even have to be a chiropractor, or do manual therapy, but to actually know when and where to apply those things. I think that's the hardest piece with education. And so, can you maybe, as Rocktape, as an educator, can this help us to kind of guide people to those places of maybe, hey, maybe we need to pay attention more? Like, this could guide the assessment piece of, we need to look at this hip, for example, in this thing.
We just had this conversation this morning, and I think the term that keeps coming back to us that he just stated was augmented. Mm-hmm. So the augmented capacity of this type of technology to allow us to have better pattern recognition, folks like Brett, that's been around for, I don't know how long you've been in practice, but probably as long as I have. We have reps under our belt that we could start to recognize these things because of our experience. But, younger practitioners are looking for that same type of expertise, and now they have it, in the tips of their hand, and tips of their fingers, because this technology allows you to recognize patterns through the machine learning that it has available within it. So data is critical, and we can now take that data and condense it to be able to provide us more insights.
Love that. And looking globally. I know, Brett, that's one of your big themes in all of your education, looking globally. Just because you have a low back complaint doesn't mean something else globally is the issue. And so I think, we tout, Greg Cook and SFMA and FMS for forcing people to look globally. But it sounds like with motion capture, maybe some of these other things, it's not just as simple as doing a range of motion check. There's other things that we can be doing with this motion capture to maybe guide us towards looking more distally with those cases.
Yeah. And I just want to comment on that. One of the things that totally, I think, changed our profession was it was FMS, SFMA, the work that Greg Rose and Greg Cook, what they put together. They're the first ones to standardize movement assessment. We owe so much to them. But Kinetisense, the cool thing with the 3D motion capture is we can look at a different type of movement, and that's that subconscious brain-based movement. Yeah. Where we get someone to do a complex movement pattern, and we don't have to break it out into its pieces, because if we break it out into its pieces, we take away the neurology, the fascial slings that are involved, right? So we want to be able to assess in complexity of movement and triplanar to see, hey, when they go into that squat, they get to a certain depth to clear a certain range in the hip or compensation, they'll shift here. And looking at that sequencing effect that occurs, where is range of motion being taken from other joints to accommodate this? That's really the key, because we don't think about every single joint and muscle we fire when we squat. Right? We have our cerebellum, we have these different, primary motor cortex that are working together to map that out. And we have history of movement and injuries that affect that mapping. So that's why it's really cool, and it's super efficient. And I think one of the big reasons why it's hard for practitioners and sometimes the new practitioners to implement a good assessment is it sometimes takes time. Mm-hmm. But if you can have efficiency built in and do recheck every time because it's fast, we have more data to work with, and we can drive a better care pathway. Assessment's crucial. It's the compass. Right. Compass for care pathway. Right.
What do you guys do with general population patients? The athletes are kind of obvious, but what are some of the movements that you might potentially be looking at with motion capture?
Yeah, great question. So, really, the way that we look at movement, whether you're a professional athlete that's 25 years old, or whether you're a senior that's 75 years old, right? We always have a capacity at any given point functionally and a demand. the athlete has a higher demand, obviously, and it has to have a higher capacity functionally to hit that. But even the senior just maybe wants to get off the couch. Sure. That's their demand.
Yeah.
So being able to quantify that. So assessments like even clinical gait, just having someone, if they can walk, let's just walk towards me. That gives me a ton of information. Or even just a posture snapshot, a range of motion snapshot. So we even have a CAMS, a functional movement screen for seniors that actually looks at risk of fall.
Got it.
Right. So it doesn't matter if you're, again, a 70-year-old pickleballer, or if you're, a professional athlete, or even if you're, a 10-year-old that just for wellness care for assessment. We have different screens that pertain to different age groups.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And how do you answer? So this like new kind of youngish evidence-based group that's telling us we can't palpate. There's no research in like all these things. There's no research in how we should move. Right. We need to be really careful that we're looking at this video of you, that we might be educating, like we might be causing chronic pain because we're telling you're moving wrong. And we're all an evidence-based group, so I say that in jest. But but like, so what are your thoughts when? Because I know I'm sure you get pushback, because I know we get pushback on all of it. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were having that discussion actually this morning. Again, that expert augmentation. When you're able to have a reproducible assessment, first of all, we're going to be able to collect that data that's going to then show what normative is, or what is normal or abnormal. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to build that trend data. But again, if we can show change, if you can prove change, and the system proves change, at a microcosmic level within the session itself to the patient. Mm-hmm. Here's your range of motion. We then did soft tissue work. We did exercise. Now here's your new range of motion. The numbers don't lie.
Right. Yeah.
So the things that we know we change, with patients, with how we treat, it's quantified, right? We quantify that. We have a system that can show change, show numbers associated with that. Again, that expert augmentation, right? Where if I can screen someone, figure out the areas of compensation, even from a performance standpoint, and then apply palpation and additional skills. Our hands are, as chiropractors, as soft tissue therapists, we get a lot of information from how we palpate. We pair that with the motion capture outputs. We now have expert augmented. So that's really the key.
Yeah.
It doesn't replace.
Is there a danger in educating the patient on a piece of technology that maybe they're not moving in an ideal strategy? And I'm on your side. I'm just saying, like, this is the questions we get asked. So I was just curious what your...
Right. Yeah. Well, it is the cool thing with Kinetisense is that we can get mapping of various joints that we can look at. We can attack. We can, as a practitioner, we can choose to attack certain ones or go after certain ones. Being able to quantify where they stand based on normative, that's very, very powerful.
I think too, like Michael Shacklock, he says it beautifully. He says it's not the imaging, it's the problem. It's the education off the imaging.
Correct.
So you could be gathering all this data, and that doesn't mean that you have to be telling the athlete or the patient that they're moving in the wrong stereotype. Right. You could just be, that's your own information, and it's guiding treatment without like creating any kind of like centrally mediated pain syndrome that someone might be worried about, with that. Again, I just feel like that pendulum had swung. It was so necessary. I remember the big PhD guy 20 years ago was a guy named David Linton. Got everybody kind of thinking about the biopsychosocial model. Mm-hmm. And then now it's like that pendulum has swung so damn far that like we've in a way lost our mind, So then you have like these new evidence-based, practitioners, and like they're pushing back on us at DNS. I'm sure that if they're not pushing back on you now, they will.
They are. Yeah.
I'm sure you felt it too, Capo. And so anyways, I think there's always like a happy medium, in that. And but that's what I always say about technology, even like the imaging. Like if you have to understand how to look at an MRI if you're working with athletes, that doesn't mean you have to scare them on what you're seeing on it, And I think that's probably going to be the same for the motion capture, because we see it like with the wearables now. Like you can see like patients who are like a little bit too addicted or too hypervigilant to like what their watch is telling them. Therefore, it's almost like creating an anxiety around that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just what you do with that information.
It's what you do and how you convey it. You talk about Shatlock and how can you compete with a with an expert like that is just saying it's how you use this as an educational tool, in my opinion, versus a nocebo if you're going to use that as saying this is where your dysfunction is, and that's something you should be concerned about, versus using that as a teaching tool. Is like, here's how we're going to be optimizing your ability to move and using this data to kind of influence our decision making. I think that's the way that we should be taking any type of information that we're gathering.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's also important, the words that we use when we're conveying this to the patient, words like that, like dysfunction, you can call that compensation. This is how you're compensating. This is how, you're not maximizing, the ideal movements that you could get to, and taking kind of almost like a performance mindset instead of like the threat mindset. As practitioners, we tend to talk about, this is risk, this is susceptibility. Those are the words that can create that hypervigilance in a patient, I think, and fear almost.
Yeah.
So just conveying it as, hey, this is where you stand from a functional standpoint, from a functional capacity standpoint today, and this is what the demand is of of your day, or what you want your demand to be. We now have a compass to get you there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's as simple as it is, and then apply different tools to help them achieve that. Right?
I mean,
and then reassess them along the way.
What are the limitations with the technology? I mean, we can go outside, we can use this anywhere. We can. There's no limitations to it.
Well, for the most part, you can pretty much, you can assess anywhere. Sometimes direct sunlight outside can affect the LiDAR a little bit, but no, the versatility of it is.
I mean, it is so affordable.
It is.
I think everybody's going to have.
And if you really think the clinics that have really
don't go change it now.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
We're locked in at 200.
We don't. You guys are locked. Anyone that hears this on the podcast, you're locked in.
Yeah.
But that idea of expanding the walls of your clinic, right? So we think about, we have brick and mortar clinics, a lot of us, and we think that we're so confounded by our brick and mortar space. Well, technology like this, we can take this out to like the pickleball courts. We can take this to the golf course. We can assess. We have a new golf
Selling
assessment.
out for the money.
There's a new golf assessment.
Pickleball and golf.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Smart man. Go where the money is.
Exactly. Exactly. Or even like the hockey teams. It just expands the walls of your clinic into the community, and it establishes you as the movement expert. It does.
And it sounds too like you can kind of standardize your own screens, if I'm right? So just because I'm not doing the same assessments that Capo is doing doesn't mean that there's still not data surrounding that. You're still building a database in your own patients, your own populations, whether that's a hockey team or a basketball team. You can have a population-based data set on the local basketball. Sorry to interrupt this episode, guys. Hope you're enjoying it. Real quick, we have an amazing opportunity. The DNS World Congress is coming to Chesterfield, Missouri this June 14th through the 16th, 2024. If you guys attended our NDS or our Neurodynamics Congress, you know that this is something that's very close to Brett and I's heart, something that we are going to keep doing. So this year's Congress is all about DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. This is literally like looking into the ocean, as Brett says. This is the lens that we look through each and every one of our patients with, and this is going to be an amazing opportunity because Pavel is back in town. So the originator, the creator of DNS, Pavel Kolash, is coming to the States for the first time in 5 or 6 years. I don't even know how long it's been. He's bringing along with him Elena Kobasova, which is literally the backbone of DNS. She's one of the most underrated neurologists in the world. So we're super excited to hear from her. Marcela Safarova, if you haven't heard her speak, she is literally the queen of pediatrics and musculoskeletal health. We also are going to have almost every single UNS instructor at the Congress who's going to be speaking. It's going to include demos, lectures, hands-on. We're going to have, as always, a get-together afterwards with your chance to talk to these guys face-to-face and have a couple drinks with them. This is going to be a great opportunity. It's a great price too, especially for students. It's only $4.99. So be sure to use the code DNS student to get your discount on that. For more information, or if you have questions, go to gestaltedu.com/DNS-Congress. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Enjoy the rest of the football team.
100%. And you can like your custom screens, you can make your own custom workflows with Kinetisense. So if you don't agree with, let's say, the CAM's workflow,
sure,
you can make your own assessment. We can have, the Gestalt shoulder assessment.
Yeah.
And it actually becomes a module in your system when you build it. So it's really, really cool that way. We even have micro dashboarding where you can have your own dashboard that has the population data of your system feeding in there, where you can select parameters and it tells you what that micro outcome is.
Yeah.
So we're turning, this is a term that Capo loves to use and came up with, is that we're turning our practitioners into data scientists or into movement scientists. And that's a really cool concept because I think that's going to elevate, the MSK field to a whole new level.
Elevate and validate. If you're talking about the evidence base and you use the quotations like I do when we're talking about that community, is like, if you truly want information to validate what you're doing, you need this type of objective data. Otherwise, it's just opinion, right? So I don't question that they're looking for more information, but how are we going to capture this information in a clinical setting that is
I think that's
user friendly,
clinical setting.
Correct. Right? So versus taking a group into a university based setting where we're plucking the subject base from 20 to 24-year-old males, because those are the only ones that'll take $50 for the assessment.
Can I donate platelets too?
Right. How long is that needle? So my point is that this allows us to be that scientist that we've always been looking to do and actually capture this type of information to take the profession and our clinical experience further.
There's a lot of parallels with ultrasound with this technology. I feel like, now, as time's gone on, a lot of people now have diagnostic ultrasound in the treatment room with them. And you don't necessarily need to be a DAC-bar. You don't need to be a PhD biomechanist to use your technology. I think there's a lot of really close parallels with those two pieces.
I know Rocktape has been a huge proponent of diagnostic ultrasound.
Honestly, again, this whole conversation about this transformative age that we're in, I'm at the other end of my career, right? And I'm more excited about how we could leverage technology to take our profession and just MSK medicine to the next level, is leveraging technology. I see it this way, and this is kind of I'm trying to folks to kind of imagine what the future could look like. I'm a 52-year-old I'm a Trekkie, meaning I saw Bones have this scanner that he would scan, the folks and say, you've broken your humerus and now we need to do this. And so this is the era that we're moving into. We have that technology. We have motion capture that we can get with an iPad. We have ultrasound looking at tissue screens of tissue dynamics and how tissues are moving using MSK ultrasound. We have wearables, and we were just testing one this morning looking at physiological parameters or biomarkers like nitric oxide and muscle oxygen. It's just, to me, the technology environment that we live in now, we should be taking advantage of to optimize our outcomes.
Yeah. So what do you think, Capo? What's the next 10 years look like? If 10 years from now, if everything that we see now technology-wise, how is this all implemented, and how do we not add more time to our clinical days and things like that? Because I think that's the hard part, maybe the knock on motion capture and these other things too, is how do you still see the amount of patients that we're seeing? Because we all want to help people and we all want to see as many people as we can. Also, you make more money when you see more people. So then what's the writing on the wall combination or integration where we're not adding, there's only 24 hours in a day, we're not adding a couple more.
Yeah, I think, and Ryan says this best, is that we're actually becoming more efficient with technology if we're willing to take advantage of the opportunity. And the taking advantage of smart devices, technology like Kinetisense that you can leverage offsite, if you will. So this idea of remote or telehealth, which I think is an old term that really shouldn't, it's virtual health really is the environment that we're moving into, is that we can actually scale our knowledge and actually see more people in a virtual environment by taking advantage of tools and technology to be able to see people not in the clinic, but virtually. Mm-hmm. And I think there's going to be a kind of a hybrid where we see people when necessary, but if we're going to be guiding them through corrective strategies and optimizing their movement, we could do that virtually as well by taking advantage of these tech.
So is Kinetisense eyeing a virtual component to this?
100%.
Yeah.
So there's the, I think it was mainly with COVID, but this remote patient monitoring, RPM and RTM, there's actually billing codes for this. We're not far away from having, the screening component and the hands-on care happening in the clinic. But then, as Capo says, being able to say, hey, here's the touch points, automated touch points of corrective strategies with that remote patient monitoring that now basically clones, the Capo into 3 Capos in the clinic.
That's scary.
Which is really scary. It's a lot of Italians. Just kidding.
That's true.
So that's a big one. The other piece to this too is if you have expert augmentation with technologies that can actually be applied by the non-practitioner in the clinic. how much more time have we now cleared up for the practitioner just to treat?
Right.
So we have clinics that have a little room or a space where they'll have a kinesiologist or an assistant that runs the screens based on what the practitioner wants it for screening of that patient. And then that data automatically goes to the iPad of the practitioner in another room, and they can now start to apply treatment.
And it could be inclusion and exclusion criteria for actually seeing someone hands-on versus things that could be taken care of without hands-on treatment.
Correct.
Well, I'm telling you right now, you're formally invited to our GATE seminar in the fall. So we
Fantastic.
have, I think myself, Courtney Conley, Tom Michaud's going to be there.
Wow.
Maybe we'll have Capo there.
Sure, yeah, Capo.
But anyways,
only one Capo, not four.
Yeah, right.
send us the best Capo. But what do you think, like, if we just watch a patient walk right here? Like, what can Kinetisense tell us about, like, the gait cycle that might be missed by the human eye, especially the untrained human eye?
So what's really, really important is the transverse plane. So Kinetisense, just walking towards the system, we can actually see the dynamics of the axes of the body, of the hips and the shoulders, lateral shift in that transverse plane. And it also, at the end of the snapshot, gives us a frontal plane overall representation of their gait compensation cycle, like a one-time snapshot of what the entire gait cycle compensations were. It also then shows an overhead trace line. That's probably the most valuable thing, because I can see if they're going into like an anterior posterior rock with their gait, if they're staying in line with their gait, or if they're starting to offload and shift to one side. It'll actually overhead trace that in real time.
Interesting.
So you think about, even the subluxation based chiropractor, the power of a gait assessment, looking at overhead tracing with like a PI ilium even, and a simple manipulation of the SI joint and then retesting, it's insanely powerful, right? So that's just one example. Or whether you're a soft tissue practitioner, you're going to go after some of the muscles and retest. So it's about symmetry, right? And if you have a tool like that can show asymmetry in a triplanar fashion, including the overhead view from the transverse plane of the system, it's very powerful.
You're getting Gary Gray all torqued up. I know
do you know
that.
Gary? Have you met Gary Gray yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
Okay.
He would love
Yes.
your technology for him would be perfect.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, I think it was good, insightful. I mean, we're all here today because Dr. Leahy invited us for a panel discussion tonight, which is going to be amazing. And I think that's the big theme is how do we integrate technology into what we're doing every day? Brett and I are homers. Like, we love using our hands and we love using manual therapy, but I think you made some really good points on how we can use assessment to actually teach some of the things that we're thinking about and hopefully catch some of the strays that maybe we're missing in assessment, which I think is the goal for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be the person that's missing things, and to help learn and to educate at the end of the day, I think is what the best clinicians are doing in their lives and in their practice. I
think too, we have so many different modalities that we know helps. We talked to Mike about this on our podcast before, and he said the funniest thing. We were done with our podcast. We're walking out, and I just kind of asked him, like, well, what do you think about all these young snot-nosed kids who think that you don't know how to palpate and you're not like actually changing adhesion and things like that? He goes, all I know is I'm going to Denver right now to see 30 professional athletes, and they love what I'm doing. So that's all.
Something must be working.
It was kind of a savage remark.
It's validation.
But I think, I think like what's happening now, everybody's like questioning everything. Yeah. But like people, what they're not doing, what they should be doing is saying, we know this is an effective modality. What do we do to research this and like prove the fact that this is working? Maybe the mechanism wasn't right originally, but this is the new mechanism and this is how it's working. I think everybody now, if you listen to like what evidence is telling us, we would have no tools. Evidence-based medicine now is telling us in musculoskeletal medicine, you'll be fine. Just do a general movement strategy. You just go on a walk today. You'll be fine. Mm-hmm. It's all in your head. You just need to, you can compensate for anything. Mm-hmm. It's insanity. And again, there's 5% of our patients who need a general movement strategy, who have central immediate pain. Mm-hmm. There's that. But we can't treat the 95 like the 5, so I think it's what we're all living through right now. And especially like people that are our age, is the younger generations, like they're looking to us like, okay, we're questioning these mechanisms, so maybe it is on us. We got to continue to use technology to kind of reinforce what it is that we're doing. And it sounds like you have a very, very powerful tool to do this.
We do. It's you got to be quantitative, right? We're actually answering the bell as to what they're tasking us to is show us change, show us proof. There's no better way than to do that with a data set like what we were able to develop, to be able to put back in and augment that practitioner is very, very powerful.
There's an old saying, in God we trust, everyone else bring numbers.
That's right. They bring numbers, exactly. And you know what the cool thing is there are things that we are seeing in the data set that are insanely powerful that have never been discovered before.
Oh, I'm sure you're sitting on all kinds of shit.
Well,
like that.
and putting that in, and because it's not only like, hey, does this one intervention make change or not? We're starting to see like this intervention plus this intervention plus this intervention actually shows greater change than these other three that we always thought theoretically would make the biggest change, right? So whether it's tape, like the taping component with soft tissue, you name it. So that's going to be exciting, I think, in the next 10 years, is we'll be able to actually change the game and move from a theoretical perspective that we've always been in somewhat, theoretically driven, to a science-driven approach. And then what happens to the MSK profession? We rise, right? That's what's going to happen.
I love it.
And how do you continue to be a thought and content leader? Both this question for both of you. I mean, you got to have a bunch of competitors. I would think like they see your technology and they want to, like, how do you continue? I'm sure you feel pressure if you got to keep.
You got to keep moving ahead. I mean, luckily we were the first ones to do clinical markerless motion capture. We were the first ones in that space 10 years ago. So we've had a runway ahead of anyone else, but we got to continue to push and press. And honestly, it's being with thought leaders like you guys, like with Capo too. And we had a great session with Dr. Leahy where it's like we're a bunch of mad scientists. And like some of the ideas that came out even from that session this morning, I can't wait to implement that in my
What'd you guys do this morning just so we can...
You got to tell the story.
We started kind of looking at, tech that I've been interested in. And, to your point, I wanted to start the process of validating, is this information useful or not? So we broke out the MSK ultrasound and we started looking at how an intervention like an ART, protocol can actually affect a different area of the body that's not being influenced. And we were able to kind of document not only tissue changes according to these fascial chains, if you will, but also physiological changes like changes in nitric oxide to a distant area that's being manipulated with a hands-on technique. So today was just more of like a curious, mad scientist session where we just said, let's just see what happens when we do X. Yeah. And we use these technologies, including Kinetisense, to say what changes occurred. So it's just an opportunity for us to actually start to spitball, concepts that we think might be doing something, and we were able to test it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I guess sometimes too, the intervention could create like a derogatory response, and then you would know. It's not always like, oh, I did this and I look, this is better. You could maybe do something and be like, oh shit, like we created too much motion here. Like you could actually use it for
it's not meant to be. It's just information, and then that information should change, the outcome.
That's well said. Yeah.
So like ultimately, I think this one thing that I learned from Mike today, and I hope we have a discussion tonight, is that he's evolved in his 30 or 40 years of delivering this method of approach from new knowledge that he's gained, right? So being open enough to changing the philosophy that it might be built off of is demonstrating, true insights.
Right.
So I think technology is just going to allow us to maximize that learning curve because we see things that we just can't pick up with our naked eye.
Yeah. Well, Capo, you're always, we talked a bunch about Kinetisense, which I'm happy we did, but give us the 5-minute, what's Rocktape up to these days? I know that everything changes.
If you're not following Capo on social media, he says the shit he puts out is insane.
But what's the next 5 years, or what's new with Rocktape? What are you guys working on right now?
It's just, again, leveraging technology, and technology in my world when it comes to tape, if we're talking about, textiles, is that there's some new cool technology that I want to take advantage of. I have taken advantage of. So we just launched a new tape that you'll see on the market. Actually, you'll see it in Paris this year on Olympians, where we created a tape that's got a material, and I like using this term because it makes me sound smarter, but a non-Newtonian material, which ultimately just means that it's a material that that is what they call strain resistant, that it behaves differently depending on the movement that you're actually performing. So the tape has this impregnated material or super polymer that actually will stiffen according to the speed of movement. So if you're moving slowly, it'll yield just like traditional tape. But if you move quickly, it will stiffen according to the speed of that movement to be able to quote unquote support the tissues.
That's crazy.
So again, leveraging technology that exists. This is a technology that's been in the market for years. We just figured out how to impregnate tape to be able to make it something that we can apply to different areas of the body.
That's very cool. I saw
smart tape.
reflector tape too.
Yeah,
That one was so cool. I saw that. I was like, holy shit, that's awesome.
It's just putting reflective beads into tape. So then folks that are not me, because I don't believe that 4 a.m. exists, but those that are early morning, exercisers, you can apply tape that actually makes you more reflective, so you don't get struck by, the Mack truck. So that's a new one that we brought out, and the one that I'm really excited about moving into the future is taking advantage of a technology called phase change material. Have you guys heard of that before? So just material that has the ability to absorb different energy. So if you apply this material on your body and you're really hot, it will absorb the heat and reflect a cooling effect back to the body. Wow. And vice versa. If you're too cold, it will absorb the coolness and flip that into a heating energy back to the body. So it actually has the ability to reflect the energy that it's being exposed to. So that, to me, if we could translate that into a textile that we can apply either through clothing or even tape, that could potentially have some utility in the future. So,
and what's your current answer on what the tape is doing from a neurologic standpoint? I mean, it just changes. I feel like people's explanation of how it's working continues to always change. Now, as of 2024, if you had 3 sentences, how would you say? What's the mechanism on how tape can be so effective with the?
Ultimately, the research is pretty clear that it's another way of communicating to the nervous system. So it's providing a non-noxious stimulus via the skin, because we're taping the skin, and we need to get away from thinking that we're taping a muscle.
Yeah.
We're taping the skin, which is a significant megaphone to the brain, and we're providing input to an area of the body that might be lacking clarity of where it is in space. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we take advantage of that to be able to start improving our capacity to move. And again, taking advantage of technology, we can show pre and post that there's no other way of explaining what has just occurred. If we can change movement just by a strip of tape on a body part, it's neurally driven, not muscular driven, not bottom up, but top down.
Subconscious movement.
Yeah. So that's really the kind of the new understanding of how tape really is influencing.
And I don't know if that's really going to change much.
It shouldn't.
I agree.
It shouldn't. I think we could become more specific, and maybe my last point of things that I'm really focusing attention on is that maybe there's a directional bias to how you apply this tape. So again, we've been told in the past that taping origin to insertion to origin can influence the body, and that's been debunked. But there is an opportunity to understand that someone might be affected more positively for their demand by taping them in a specific direction, because that optimizes the conversation. That part we're still working through. We call it tweak taping. That N of 1, I might be able to influence someone's knee function by dragging their skin in one direction versus another. And that's becoming kind of exciting, because it's almost like a light switch effect for some people to influence their movement.
You and I have similar, heroes when it comes to tape, Tim Brown being one of them.
Sure.
And, Tim's kind of started that conversation with
SBR.
direction. Yes, it's exactly right. And I mean, I am here to tell you that there is something there, because every day on the sideline of a football game, like, there will be something that tape will blow my mind of some tweak that will get someone out there with tweak taping. And so I'm here to say there's more to that. So I'm excited for you to get more clear on that. So I can start stealing your explanations.
Do you think we're totally off the fact, like, there was a thought for a while, like we could tape a certain way and that would potentially be telling you what muscles being inhibited, things like that? I mean, is that all like, that's gone, that's old? Yeah.
It should be gone.
Yeah.
I hope it's dispelled more and more, because there's enough evidence to indicate the opposite.
Right.
It's just, there's no replication of that model of approach. So we don't foster that message within our
non-nociception afferent pathway back to the, I mean, that's
the
what
brain
you should
do what it's
route.
meant
Yeah,
to do.
that's perfect.
Especially too, I mean, we've been influenced heavily by Antonio Stecco and Stecco's work recently, and the Leahy as well. And so I think the more you understand the fascia's play in the musculoskeletal system, the more it starts to make sense of where tape maybe has a bigger influence other than others. And so I think, to me at least, it's that interplay makes a lot of sense between the skin, the fascia, the deep tissues as well. So,
Correct. Yeah. So that's where we're at right currently.
love it. Guys, thank you for sitting down. We're going to go clean up and get ready for this panel discussion. Stay tuned. The panel discussion will be put out as a podcast as well. And so we're looking forward to it. And thank you for being a thought leader, both you guys, and for helping us kind of show some of the things that we're seeing in the treatment room and to have better explanations. And where can they find Kinetisense? How can they get a hold of you if they want to talk more about it and things like that?
Just www.kinetisense.com.
Yeah.
And we're on Facebook as well, so you can contact us that way.
Beautiful.
See, Facebook.
There you go. It's still there. Capo,
still there.
Still, right? Rocktape.com.
Unfortunately, my age category would
We're
recommend
Facebook
it.
people.
We
Yeah.
need to be Facebook, so we're going
Swerve
to
into
stay true
it.
to the OG of social media.
Yeah.
Just FYI.
Don't apologize. Swerve
Well,
into it.
don't disrespect MySpace like that. Come on, man.
I didn't know you were going to bring that up, but we're talking about my social handle. The Movement Advocate is my new handle, and ultimately it's split up into what I'm learning in respect to the human body, and then whatever makes me chuckle. I'll throw those out there as well.
I love it. The memes are classics. So yeah, Brett and I always share those with each other. They're always good shares. So anyway, thank you guys for sitting down with us. I really appreciate it. As always, guys, good luck with patience, and we'll see you next time. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Gestalt Education Show. If you liked it, share it, subscribe to it, send it to your friends, send it to someone that needs to hear this message. We really want everyone to be able to tune in and get the best clinical advice that they can, which we're hoping that we're giving to you with these special guests. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, or if you have any suggestions on upcoming conversations, let us know. For a list of our upcoming courses, we're adding them all the dang time. So go to gestaltedu.com, click on courses, and they'll all be right there for you. All right, have a good day.